Hi, and welcome back to Blush and Bloom, the podcast where we explore the bold, beautiful, and often overlooked truths in women's health. I'm your host, Gigi. I'm also the founder of Asale, and today's guest is Alissia. She is the founder of Psychopositivity, a women's health initiative that helps companies turn menstruation, menopause, and every phase in between into strategic levers for better workplace performance and well-being. If you've ever wondered why women's health still feels like a side conversation in the workplace, or what it would look like if companies actually supported women throughout their cycles, careers, and life stages, this conversation is for you. So, let's get started. All right. Hi, Alicia. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. And for us to get started, let's get to know you a bit more. So, how do you like to introduce yourself these days?
So I'm Alissia Quaintance. I live here in Munich, and I'm active in kind of two worlds. So one world is all about bringing psychological safety and removing the stigma around women's health in companies and helping companies to improve productivity and loyalty and reduce sick days by bringing up the reality for 50% of the workforce. And the other world is I'm a naturopathic health practitioner here in Munich. So one day a week, I work in my practice and I work with women and men, and my work is focused on the stress related side of things. So I help people relax their nervous system because, as we all know, a relaxed nervous system is always money in the bank to do whatever you want to do. So it's a long introduction, but that's who I am.
All right, I think it was perfect. Okay, so let's talk a bit about your startup or your company. Sorry. So, what sparked the idea for psychopositivity, and was there a personal or professional moment that made you realize that you want to do something, or there was something missing in the workplace?
Yeah, that's a perfect question, actually. So my first life was in the tech world. So originally, when I started out, I used to work in product development for highly innovative products. So like virtual reality, artificial intelligence, voice recognition systems, and stuff like that. And so that was really fun. And I enjoyed it a lot until I found that technology is never really the issue, but people's resistance to change has always been a main topic. So I always work with big companies, bring in those top innovations, and technology and figuring out the technological side was always the smallest problem, but it's about bringing people into change. So I got into this digital transformation business and researched a lot about how organizations change, how do big groups of people change. And so for a long time, I've worked in that space of really bringing digital transformation processes into companies until I became a mother myself. And for the first time, I was confronted with something very, very natural for women. Some women go through it, some don't, but I was lucky to have my son. He's 6 years old now, and then I saw, I was kind of hit with a bomb, and I was hit with something that in my career never. It's like a muscle. I've never learned how to flex, getting into my feminine strengths and being with a baby and being a mom. And the narrative that we have in the business world right now is that women can have it all. If they can just organize it right, and if they have the right partner, then everything can work as it was before. But for me, that just wasn't true, because I was in this conflict between like the holy mother who takes care of the baby and then the businesswoman who works like she has no children. And I just needed to find my own identity in that. So, and then I wondered, why does nobody talk about this reality in the business world? And why is it never correlated with our productivity and how we show up at work? And while looking at the process of birth and, postpartum, I saw that a lot of women have issues every month with their menstruation, that there's conditions like endometriosis and PCOS and lots of other things related to fertility that are not ever addressed. And then I saw, and that was about 5 years ago when my son came about, and then there's menopause. And 5 years ago, there wasn't as much talk as it is now about menopause. And so I saw those important topics, and I saw how they majorly influence how we show up at work. And it's true for 50% of the population on our planet, and yet nobody talks about it, because at work, we're still living very much in this frame of mind that we have developed in the industrialization, right? Where we have factories and we go there and we work our 9 to 5 and we have shifts and everything is linear. And in the tech world, everything is exponential, right? So things, can even get more productive. but we never look at the reality of 50% of the population. So I decided to step out of my tech world, and I trained in Munich here as a naturopath practitioner. And because we're in Germany, you have to get trained and licensed. And I went through this extensive medical training, which allows me to practice here in Munich. So, and I learned about health, and I learned about how do hormones work? How does the body work? What happens when you have endometriosis, and what symptoms do you have, and how can you alleviate those, and what happens during menopause? And with menopause, it was a super interesting, and it still is a super interesting business case, because we think, well, with menopause, women lose fertility, but that is only a small bit of the story, because the change is not limited to our reproductive organs, but it mainly happens in the brain during perimenopause, when the hormones start adapting to this new chapter of life, where, by the way, if we assume that we're going to be 100 years old, with a good medical system that we have, the postmenopausal phase makes up to 50% of a woman's life. And we don't know anything about it. And so this adaptation and transition happens, and we are having all those effects on the brain and our, executive function, and we don't know anything about it. We don't know anything about the symptoms. We don't know anything how to address them. And the pretty scary thing is that also the medical community is very, very rudimentally trained on that transition. So in America, practitioners, they have an hour of menopause education in their whole education, right? So yes, yeah, that's actually true. Yeah. So basically we are, in this space of where we just don't understand our bodies. So what my task was, and this is what caused, and this is back to your question, a long story short, this is what caused, my fascination with the female cycles. And also through my personal journey, as I said, like, I've never used the muscle of really stepping into my feminine power until I had my child. And that was a loss. And I think for every balanced human being, we should have access to all sides of us. And in like Eastern philosophy, you have the yin and yang, right? Like, so it's not even a gender thing, but it's really like, in order to have balance, we have to practice both sides in us. And if we have too much of one thing, it's always very one-sided and not in balance. So so having my tech background and my understanding about organizational change and how human beings changed, I got inspired to found Cycle Positivity, which my main mission is that women see their cycles as a strength and not a limitation for work and productivity. Because what I find is we kind of don't talk about it because we have never learned to understand, to value those cycles and work with them and use them as a catalyst for growth, for change, for adaptability. And this is what kind of companies I believe are really looking for these days. We all want to innovate and grow and adapt to very crazy markets, very crazy situations in the world. And this is what kind of gave birth to this company and birth to this idea. And since then, I'm doing this for 5 years now. I've been lucky to work with really big clients, with big tech companies that trust me to guide them through this process of change, where we empower men and women with the knowledge, where we create psychological safety and spaces that remove the stigma about talking of the physical reality of every woman in their company. If we decide to have kids or not, we menstruate and we have menopause. So that's my mission, and that's what I do.
That is mind-blowing. I have so many questions now. So, like, how about we start from the beginning? Like, how did you approach these companies to explain and then explain to them, how did the entire process even start? Like, how did you make them listen to you? Like, this is something that you should be watching out for, that you should be practicing. You should be adjusting your practices, you're moving from perks to making this a standard. Like, how did that look like?
Yeah, that was the magic trick, right? And so what really helped is that I am an established expert in the tech scene, and I did have my network of people who listened to me, and amazing women and men who got curious. And this is what I would recommend to everybody who's pushing into that space that is growing right now, which is amazing. We have a big tech space with femtech that is popping up about hormonal health and fertility and medical, services and all of that, which is amazing. And the biggest task was to find the right person in the organization, where not really like the right department, because this thing is not a thing that's on anybody's list. in companies right now. So it's not like there's no budget for women's health in companies in terms of productivity and loyalty and everything we're trying to change. So you have to find the right person that gets it, that has a personal story. And a lot of my clients, wonderful clients, they have the understanding and they have a personal story. So, for example, a male sponsor, his mother was in healthcare and he grew up with the knowledge about female cycles. So he understood it. And he has a wife that's going through menopause. So he's like, I get it. We need to bring this in. And another female sponsor, she had ovarian cancer. And she shared that story publicly, that she never thought about her menstruation as something special, something important, until she was in the situation of suddenly being in threat of being induced into surgical menopause through the surgery on her tumors. So she is somebody in the company who went through something that really made her aware of the importance of the cycles. And then she was bold enough to bring this into the company and argument for it. And this is where you really have to understand not only finding somebody with a purpose fit, but also somebody who understands systems and how to change systems. And for this, I think what was really helpful was my background in tech, because back in the days when I started working with AI and virtual reality, nobody had budgets for that either. So I think you have to be a little comfortable in spaces where there's no path yet, kind of having the fresh snow, or like the path not yet taken, and just kind of have fun in that phase and finding people you align with. Those people and yourself need to understand systems and structures, and then change can happen. And then you need to, create a movement. That's important. You need to have ambassadors. And luckily, when we open the box in organizations to speak about women's health, it's like Pandora's box is opening. And we have so many people sharing about their endometriosis diagnosis and how they deal with it at work, or their journey through menopause and how they have figured out their own personal journey. So it is like, a little bit of magic to bring this into a big organization. But as soon as you bring it, and you create that space, you have so much support and so many voices. And then you see, oh my God, this is amazing. Why haven't we looked at this earlier? And now we can just work with it.
This is incredible work. So how about we take it away a bit from the company perspective and looking at it from the individual perspective. So how would a woman who is working along with her cycle, what would that look like in practice? Say maybe a personal example or a client, maybe?
Yeah, wonderful. That's a great question. And of course, like there's a lot to be said about menstrual cycle awareness for productivity. And I think what helps us, and I think what helps women, especially when they understand like technology. So when I work with women in tech, it's cool to kind of see the female cycles that we go through as an algorithm, because it is an algorithm. Hormones kind of work like algorithms. There's one thing that, induces a reaction in your hypothalamus, and then there's all kinds of chain reactions, and then those hormones work together, and then all the organs function. So I think it's kind of a beautiful image for me, like, what I use in my work when I do work with tech companies. And just understanding how the system works is really interesting. And luckily, we do have lots of research now in brain scans, how different phases of our cycles affect our ability to speak, our ability to learn, our ability to connect. And what we know is, and I really want to, like when I do my trainings, I like to turn around the narrative and see how can we use our cycle as a strength, and how can we empower women to understand herself better so she can use this as like the superpower that it is. And for example, for most women, they feel pretty good during ovulation, because this is kind of like how nature sets it up. So we're, our hair looks good, our skin looks good. And what we know from brain scans is that the gray matter in the hypothalamus in the brain is actually bigger during ovulation, which is crazy, right? And so all the guys are trying to biohack stuff.
Yeah.
We have it for free every month. And like the hypothalamus, is responsible for our learning, our expression, connection. So why not use this in your calendar, right? Like if and this is in my practice, is like I teach every one of my patients that they know when they're ovulating. And that's not only important for, if you're trying to have a baby, it's important for so many things. Understanding when you actually have your ovulation is such a super hack for your calendar, right? So this is one example. What I always use is that use that if you have a big meeting, use that if you have like, this big conversation with your boss and you want to be persuasive for a client. So use that knowledge. And of course, we have to know, life is not synced with our cycles, and sometimes you gotta do a hard meeting or a hard project when you're bleeding and when you're not feeling so great. But also then plan for that. Like if you have small kids at home and you have a stressful job, then pre-cook your meals and put them in the freezer beforehand and just kind of arrange your schedule around it. So I personally always have my cycle kind of predicted as far as I can. I'm 40, so it's sometimes irregular now. But I kind of try to track like when's the ovulation, when's my bleeding happen. And also when you then have your low, be more compassionate towards yourself and say like, well, this is a phase and it's going to change. And now I know it. It's like knowledge empowers us.
Yes.
And we know that. So and this is how I like to do my trainings, and this is how I like to, work with women and just empower them with that knowledge. And the same goes for menopause. Like if you are starting to get those symptoms, it's kind of nice to know that, okay, that's the transition, that's the adaptation, because a lot of women just don't know. They think they're having a heart attack. When they get a hot flash and they get dizzy, right? Because it could be, right? So, and so knowledge is power, and knowledge about reality has never harmed anybody in my opinion. So, and I think this is in feminism, it's a way overdue subject to come to the surface. And we really need to it's real business. It's not just, a soft perk.
I agree 100%. And I'm really excited to be having this conversation with you because that's basically like in a nutshell what Asala is about, the app that I'm building. But like, I used to think that like the cycle was only for like tracking periods and ovulation. Then I eventually, as I continue to like learn more about this whole thing, I started to like understand like, okay, I can like match my productivity alongside this. And then it blew my mind and it helped me understand myself better, which is why I'm building what I'm building. And like you saying all this stuff just makes me feel like this is cool. This is so cool. And like also because like from personal experiences, it like helped me understand like, okay, like my diet should look a certain type of way during this period to help me like be well prepared for, say, when I'm about to have my period. So I need to eat more of this certain types of food to prep me for that. And then understand like, okay, this is how my productivity is going to be at work. Let me adjust it this way. Maybe try to have less meetings if I can, things like this. So like, this is so cool. And I was wondering like, okay, from a company perspective, like, how are you able to like present this to companies like, okay, this is a way to like help you understand like 50% of the workforce, how they're functioning, and not make like, okay, this makes it look like women can be sort of inefficient.
Right. And this is a valid concern and a very good question, because this is what we get confronted with. We get confronted with the question, well, if we bring up that those things exist and we're setting women back, we can't do that. They're suffering anyways, and all the, topics we have. And we even have statements like, I endured it and they should too, right? This is like, get over it, right? Like it's reality. Just do your thing. So some people feel offended by having this topic brought up in the work setting. They're triggered, right? There's a lot of shame, a lot of trauma around those topics, right? So, and this is all normal and this is all welcome. And I'm always saying, if everybody agrees with what you're doing, you're probably not doing anything interesting. So it's really about being in the space of like, and also accepting other opinions. And this is why I work with very predefined, consciously chosen mechanics in my work. So the first premise is nobody has to participate in my workshops. It's all voluntarily. We never track personal data in those workshops. So everything that's being shared and said in those rooms is completely anonymous. And we are making sure with all the tools and how we're working that, we're keeping the spaces private. Yes, so those are two important things. And also important things are that we don't come and kind of shove my opinion into like this to those women. So Of course, I have my own strategy, how I deal with my health and what I do in my practice, but I always open room for, all the opinions, all the information. And we don't come with answers. We come with questions. In the first phase of my work is always about opening space for the different narratives that the women in that specific organization face and really helping them for the organization to really understand what kind of problems they are dealing with in their special company. So those are some things that I would definitely consider. Always make it voluntary because it's a private topic. It's kind of like mental health. Some people want to talk about it and some people just don't, and that's their right, and that's fine. And not everybody has to agree and, be part of it. That's very important, I would say.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then leaning more into the question. So you've also trained male employees. So how are you able to bring this conversation to men in a way that feels natural and constructive?
Yeah. So when we started working, we really asked ourselves, are we going to even invite men into the conversation? Right? It was a big thing because it does affect what's being shared if you have a room with women only or if there's men present, right? So, but we, from the get-go, we have decided to invite everybody, all gender identities, everybody who wanted to come could come. And the surprising outcome was that men who showed up were the biggest fans and ambassadors. They're like, oh my God, finally I understand. I've never heard this before. And can I have a glossary? That was my favorite. Can I have a glossary of all the terms that you're using? And I want to look it up. And I want to bring this up. How do I bring this up? And then they have the questions now I understand this, with the ovulation, and now I get it. How do I bring this up to women now? So my experience is, and we're always quick, there's a component of patriarchy that we need to smash, but there's surprisingly a lot of men that are extreme allies and ambassadors and that really understand, and they become visible in that work. And that's the good thing. If you send out a voluntary invitation to a group, you will find the right people and the right people will show up, and men have been extremely encouraging. And we had in companies, we would have teams show up. So mixed teams with the male, CEO or the leader, they would do this workshop in a team and they just would have immediate spillovers to the culture and improvements in how they work together.
Okay, that's really impressive. And it's also really exciting to hear that men are also willing to have these conversations and understand how women work and all this stuff.
Yes, okay. We have about 40%. In some workshops, we have 40% male participation.
That is incredible. Okay, that's very cool. Okay, so leaning on to the kind of feedback that you've received from some men, you've trained several participants on these topics. What kind of stories or feedback have stayed with you throughout having these conversations?
Well, I would say, and this is why I'm doubling down on the movement and on the creation of support communities in my work in organizations, that just awareness, psychological safety, and groups that listen to each other and hear each other have tremendous impact on the trust that's generated in teams, the improvement on culture. And we know from the Google Aristotle studies that trust is one major building block of high-performing teams, right? So an example is if your leader knows that, this woman is affected by endometriosis, then, and he or she checks in once in a while, how are you doing? How is it this month? Are you okay? This tremendously improves her engagement, the trust, and she feels seen and validated. Because we have stories where women literally hide behind cabinets because they're in so much pain. And if they don't have to do that anymore, if they can just, admit what's going on with them, bring themselves in the workplace, that is already helping. They don't even need, medical practitioners or more therapies. And it also making it visible. Sorry. So again, making reality visible is a super important component.
Awesome. So another question I have for you that's leaning a bit on that. So when you introduce these conversations to your clients, how does that change aside beyond the conversations and them being able to have a better understanding of how women work and how they can fully make the work environment more inclusive, and what kind of structural changes are seen as a result of the work that you're doing?
So basically, we see more of reality. We see more of that person. And in this whole conversation we have about what's going to change when artificial intelligence is going to take over our repetitive tasks, and what are humans for when they convene in organizations. It's female health, because it has such a gigantic impact on how we show up every day. it's just another data point of how to connect as a human being. And I think this is what we need to learn, and this is what we're seeing in the results. If people can show up as themselves, that helps with them feeling relaxed. And as I said in the beginning, a relaxed nervous system at the workplace has tremendous impact on how we can build products and interact with each other and connect to each other. And understanding, and I think what we do with menstrual cycle awareness, especially, we are learning to understand ourselves. Without being able to understand ourselves, it's very hard to understand other people, right?
That's true.
This is, I think, a skill and a muscle, and we have so much emerging research now on, on resilience and emotional intelligence and all of those things. And excuse me, understanding our cycles is just an amazing self-diagnosis data point. And it's not even very abstract or spiritual. It is physiology. And we have tons of research now that backs it up, right? So why not use it?
I agree. And it reminds me of the conversation I had with Ida Tin for one of the episodes where she was talking about how our periods could be a fifth vital sign. And when I saw it from that perspective, I was like, it should be obvious, but it's not obvious yet. And this is very interesting stuff.
Yes, so you talked to Ida Tin from Clue, right? She's a trailblazer. She was there before I was, so it's great.
Yeah, she has a lot of insight on the topic, and I think it's great that also with the education around this topic that women are learning more that your period goes beyond when you're seeing your period. Are you pregnant or are you not pregnant? That kind of situation, and actually understanding that your period can tell you a lot about your health and so many other things. So it's really cool stuff. Okay, so back to psychopositivity. So what's been the hardest part about building in the communicating this topic in a space that's usually under discussed? What has been the biggest challenge you faced so far?
Mm-hmm. So that's a cool question. And of course, I mean, everybody asks me these days, has, the current DEI situation, the situation of the world with the US administration, did that affect my business? I got to say, the current administration of the US did make it easier, but also it was always challenging to bring it in. So what I recommend anybody who's going into the space, create good stamina for really believing what you're doing. Surround yourself with people who get it and do your homework in terms of, your business logics and math and what you need to feel financially safe, and use, all the tools from what we know about business in that space. And this is why, I think I'm in a good position and I'm privileged. And this is why I chose to invest and do this work, because I understand the business world and I understand how systems work and I understand how technologies work and how we can use them to make a business case of that. It's really, for me, it is now a practice. And it's so weird because we assume that a woman who is very soft and has a big heart cannot be a good businesswoman. And we assume that a businesswoman is not, doesn't have a big heart. She just wants performance. And and this is what I mean with the yin and yang and with the performance. It's really about how do we find a way of communicating that is resonating with the business world, because that needs to happen. We cannot assume we're just going to get somewhere with just, good intentions, and also having the good intentions and have that vision and combining both sides. So this is what I recommend women. And if you feel, more if you don't have the business side, get somebody who's a business person. And if you're lacking the side where that is really into the topic, get partnerships and try to establish that. And I think that's kind of how with psychopositivity, my personal mission is to just how do I lead as a female CEO who is actually in tune with her cycles? How do I build a company? Because my vision is to get more people into the company, have more psychopositivity coaches that do the work in companies, enable more women to make money and to have a good life with teaching what I'm doing now, myself. And so it's really about creating stamina, doing your homework, and really being consistent.
Thank you for sharing that. This is really solid advice. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's take it a bit more from a personal perspective. I feel like I asked you this question already, but let's see. So from everything that you've been able to learn and understand so far about how women's bodies work, how has that impacted your approach to your cycle, your approach to, because you already talked a bit about this already, your approach to business and your approach to your family, and maybe setting boundaries, how does that work how does that look like in practice?
Oh yeah, it's really about, I call it, hygiene. You got to keep your hygiene, just like as we're like getting up and brushing our teeth every morning. You got to have a hygiene around your focus and your tasks, and you got to, understand your body and go with the flow and learn that self-compassion, right? Like if you're not beating yourself up when you have the phases where you're not as productive as you would like to be, that's very hard to learn. And I'm still learning. And sometimes I'm doing better, sometimes I'm doing worse. And for me, my family, my child is a non-negotiable, right? My son's coming to school this year and we just finished kindergarten. That was a big emotional process. Everybody who has kids knows that. And that is just a priority then. And then at the same time, also being accountable to your things. And this is where we really balance accountability, and it's okay to be ambitious. It's okay to have big visions. And it's also important to be in sync with your body and what is needing right now. And being accountable to other people, to your partners, to your clients, of course, like that is the trick of learning how to know yourself good enough. And that's something you develop over years to really communicate your needs and set your boundaries and really decide, like, do I have space for this or not? Overcommitting myself. Still, when I'm ovulating, sometimes I overcommit myself. When I have too much coffee, I overcommit myself, right?
Yeah.
And everybody knows that. And then you're like, oh man, what did I do, right? And so understanding that, and this is why I recommend every woman who is starting her journey of menstrual cycle awareness just to do a tracking for 3 months and then seeing your patterns, right? Like, how are you? And we have the 4 archetypes of like spring, summer, autumn, winter, follicular phase to the luteal phase, and what is happening with your body. In ovulation, some women feel great, some women feel bad. Like based on the textbook, 80% feel really good, 20% still feel, very bad during ovulation. Some women feel great during their bleed, some women don't. So really understanding yourself and it's like really knowing that it's a journey, and then when you get in your 40s things are going to change and you adapt, and then now you have different pathways. We have hormone replacement therapy, we have GLP-1 agonists, we have the full-on medical route to manage those symptoms. Then we have alternative medicine with taking care of your liver and doing strength training and managing your stress. And we will have women embarking on all those different ways and ways in between. And it's important not to judge, because somebody else is doing it differently than you do.
Yes.
And because I think when we're going into the judgment space, we hurt each other, right? Like we just need to make sure we empower everybody with information and everybody can choose their path. So that's kind of my insight. And as I said, with psychopositivity, I'm on this personal quest and I write about it. I share about how is it to be a female CEO who is in touch with those things and how does it all work out.
That's really wonderful. So next question is going to be about we are basically like heading towards the end of the podcast episode. So what do you wish like more people, men and women, understood about the connection between women's health and their general livelihood? Like what's something that you wish they understood sooner, or you wish you understood sooner?
It's a good question. Yeah, I think as a society and in business and in companies, I think, like I said, we do put a big emphasis on that muscle of like pushing through and being performant. And I think us as a society and as companies understanding that there is actually a lot of value in the quiet moments and in the moments where not much is happening. And we always have, companies have that plan with people who have a burnout, just like how do they come back as soon as possible, the same way they were before, like accepting that that's not really what we want. We want to have a spot for that person to come back in the changed way, And
Yep.
I think women, we have those physiological milestones, I would say, with puberty and then childbirth, if we choose to, and then menopause, where there's like intentional breaking spots in the journey, right? And men get there through exile and disease, right? Like when they have something bad happening to them, they change the way they work, or a burnout or something like that. And I think as we're facing so much change and transformation in companies, and we invite that and we want that, a lot of companies pay a lot of money for big transformational processes. If we actually learn from our bodies and from, here in Germany, we have 4 seasons, right? And every winter, everything kind of dies and everything's still and we go into darkness. And the next spring, we have a new bloom, a new fruit. And when we go back to that cyclical model and we embrace the light and the dark and the weak and the performant, right? I think it would help us. And I think this is where women and our bodies kind of hold the key maybe to what needs to happen to the world. So we don't blow ourselves up and have to go to Mars. That's kind of a sad narrative for me. So I think and companies are now kind of in the situation where they need to take more care of prevention for their people, because the medical systems in Europe and in the US, and I think in a lot of other countries, are completely overwhelmed with what's happening, in the world.
Yeah.
So I think when we, as companies, when we're gonna, replace all those people with machines, people who stay, you got to keep them, healthy and connected and working on things. And I think it's in the interest of companies to keep those people healthy. And just bringing this awareness with women's health it's a no-brainer. So for me, in my face, right? It's relatively simple. The people love it. And I think companies benefit a lot. And I think there's a lot we can take responsibility for. And especially in these times, I notice, because people ask me, like, as I said, like, why are you having less projects with, everything that's going on in the world? And I think with everything that's going on in the world, it really makes people very aware of what they want to stand for. So I think now is the time for people to hear this, to just double down on their values. So if they see it, like, act on it, like wherever you are, do something. So that's one of the spaces where we can do something.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I have seen like these things from like a different perspective just from speaking with you, because like being able to like understand, like when you said that like you can see your cycle and the hormone changes like an algorithm, I was like, why haven't I envisioned it like this before? Like this is so cool. And then when you also mentioned that like it reminded me that healthcare is not one size fits all. You were saying something along the lines of like for ovulation, some women have high energy and for some women it's not so. Like that helped me put into perspective, like, oh right, this is healthcare. These are people. It's not always going to be like this one size fits all model where like women are supposed to feel a certain type of way. And then I think another really cool part was when you said like you're comparing it to like seasons. And that's another really cool metaphor for this whole thing, because it's like I like it's so cool, like seeing it from the perspective that like women's bodies are just like naturally engineered for high productivity and moments of rest. And like I'm happy that I have had this conversation with you. Okay, so a final question because we are wrapping up. So what's one thing that you're learning or you're exploring right now that's exciting for you?
Community, definitely. So as I said, like becoming a mom had helped me have that idea, right? Like this bringing together two worlds, like enterprise and health and female health. And then I was lucky and privileged enough to bring this, into big companies, and it's working. And now the next step for me is really, if you have an inspiration, if you have something that works, how do you bring it more into your community? How do you align with, people like you, right? Like this is where the magic happens when we are a community of people. And how do we work in community? And how do we deal with differences in community? Not everybody, like community, that's like difficult, right? People facing each other and people having different opinions about, how life should work, how things should work, and how do we figure those things out? So really having this idea, bringing it into the world, bringing it into your community, embodying it, right? Like living, basically the biggest change we could do by embodying like what we teach and what we believe. People will automatically resonate with what you embody or what you don't. And bringing this in this context, that is the thing I'm most excited about, that I'm learning how to be in this community and like work with this big tension of female health is now becoming like this big thing because science is jumping on it. We have, the big medical wave, we have the big alternative wave. Like, where am I? How do we deal with that? How do we push things forward? So that's what's really exciting to me. And how do I, stay, for me it's really also like as my company becomes bigger, people love it and people hate it. How do I stay in the space of not being liked? How do I create more tolerance for not being liked and accepted? That's difficult, right? But when you lead, this is something you got to do.
Yeah.
And I think maybe like when I used to work in, when in my first part of life in tech space, I would just brush it off, and now become more sensitive, more vulnerable, because I'm doing something. I think when we do something that we're really passionate about, the probability to fail is much more scary and much more personal.
Yes.
Building capacity of, being in your integrity, maintaining your boundaries, and working with, that was really painful, right? This no or this criticism, working with that, standing in it, being reflective. Those are things that excite me personally.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And the final question. So for someone who wants to learn more about what you do or stay in contact with you, what's the best way to reach you and to learn more about your business?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is currently my preferred network channel where I share my writing. Yeah, right now it's really about, for me, my practice in Munich. So anybody who's in Munich can work with me on a therapeutic level. Yeah, anybody who wants to explore ideas and be part of networks and be part of communities, welcome to send me a note on LinkedIn. Go to my website. That's how it currently works.
All right. Thank you so much. I will leave all the links in the show notes and in the description. Thank you so much, Alissia, for sharing your insights with us. I am so excited to have you and have this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was great questions. And I think it was a good spark, and keep in touch. Absolutely.
All right. I hope you found the conversation valuable. Thank you again so much to Alissia for joining us and for leading the charge to make women's health a strategic priority. If you want to learn more about psychopositivity or bring this work to your company, visit psychopositivity.com and follow Alissia on LinkedIn to stay inspired. And if this episode got you thinking differently about your own health or your workplace, share with a friend or colleague. Let's keep this conversation going. And I will be leaving links to Alissia's LinkedIn and the link to her website in the description and in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and some other podcast platforms as well. And if you want to find the show notes, you will find them at www.asile.tech and in the description. The summaries will have links to everything and a quick overview of what we discussed. And you can follow us on Instagram so you can stay up to date on all the fun activities we have going on, not just at Blush and Bloom, but also at Asile as a whole, at asile.tech on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.